One tiny leaf, no bigger than a coin. Place it on the tongue and sweetness overwhelms everything you thought you knew about sugar. 300 times sweeter than table sugar. Not 3 times, not 30 times, 300 times. A single leaf from this plant contains enough sweetness to replace an entire cup of sugar. The sweetness lingers for minutes after the leaf dissolves. The aftertaste is clean, almost licorice-like, unlike any artificial sweetener ever created in a laboratory. 0 calories. Not low calorie, not reduced calorie. 0. The human body cannot metabolize the compounds that create this sweetness. They pass through the digestive system completely unchanged. Diabetics can consume this sweetness without affecting blood glucose. Weight loss patients can enjoy sweet foods without adding calories. The metabolic impact is literally nothing. Indigenous people in Paraguay have used this leaf for over 1,500 years. They called it ka he, which translates to sweet herb. They sweetened bitter medicines with it. They chewed the leaves for energy. They brewed it into teas that required no additional sweetener. The knowledge was never lost. It was simply ignored by everyone who could have profited from sharing it. In 1971, Japanese scientists discovered what the Guarani people had known for centuries. Japan banned artificial sweeteners due to health concerns. They needed an alternative. They found this leaf. Within 20 years, this plant provided 40% of all sweeteners consumed in Japan. 40% of an entire nation's sweetener market from a single species of plant. America banned this same leaf in 1991. The FDA classified it as an unsafe food additive with inadequate toxicological information. They prohibited its sale as a sweetener. They restricted its import. They sent warning letters to companies attempting to market it. They threatened seizure of products containing it. During these same years, the FDA approved aspartame, sucralose, and saccharin. Synthetic chemicals created in laboratories with documented side effects received approval. A leaf used safely for 1,500 years was banned. Then Coca-Cola got involved. The company partnered with Cargill, the largest privately held corporation in America, to develop a patented extraction process. They isolated specific compounds from the leaf. They called their product rebaudiana, later marketed as Truvia. They filed patents protecting their extraction methods. They submitted their patented extract for FDA approval. In 2008, the FDA approved rebaudiana. The same agency that had banned whole stevia leaf for 17 years approved a corporate extraction of that same leaf within months of application. This leaf is stevia. Stevia rebaudiana, the plant that corporations suppressed until they could patent a version they controlled. Today we are exposing everything the sugar industry and their corporate partners hid about this remarkable plant. If this matters to you, subscribe and hit the bell. The file is open. There is a molecular structure in stevia leaves that scientists have spent decades trying to understand and replicate. The sweetness comes from compounds called steviol glycosides. The primary compound, stevioside, provides most of the sweet taste. A secondary compound, rebaudioside A, provides sweetness without the bitter aftertaste that some people detect in stevioside. The leaves contain at least 11 different steviol glycosides, each contributing to the overall flavor profile. Dr. Cesar Compadre at the University of Arkansas College of Pharmacy has studied steviol glycosides since 1983. His research demonstrated that these compounds are not metabolized by human digestive enzymes. They pass through the stomach and small intestine unchanged. Only in the colon do bacteria break them into steviol, which the body excretes without absorbing. This explains the 0-calorie claim. Calories come from compounds the body metabolizes for energy. Steviol glycosides are not metabolized. They provide sweetness without energy. The body treats them as inert substances passing through. The 300 times sweeter claim comes from standardized taste testing conducted at multiple research institutions. Dr. A.D. Kinghorn at the University of Illinois Chicago measured stevioside at 250 to 300 times the sweetness of sucrose by weight. Rebaudioside. A measured 350 to 450 times sweeter. The exact multiple depends on concentration and what foods the stevia accompanies. The safety profile has been established through over 200 peer-reviewed studies. The joint FAO-WHO Expert Committee on Food Additives reviewed the complete toxicological database in 2008. They established an acceptable daily intake of 4 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. For a 150-pound adult, this equals approximately 270 milligrams daily, far exceeding any reasonable consumption level. The research exists, the safety is established, the efficacy is proven. The only question is why America banned it for 17 years, while approving synthetic alternatives with documented health concerns. There is a history of stevia use in South America that predates European contact by centuries. The Guarani people of Paraguay discovered stevia growing wild in the highlands near the Brazil border. They incorporated it into their traditional medicine and daily diet long before written records existed. Spanish colonizers documented stevia use in the 1500s, noting that indigenous people used a certain herb to sweeten otherwise unpalatable medicines. The first scientific description came from Moises Santiago Bertoni, a Swiss botanist working in Paraguay in 1887. He initially encountered stevia through indigenous informants who described a plant so sweet that a small portion sweetens the mouth for an hour. He spent years searching for specimens before finally obtaining samples in 1899. Bertoni named the plant Stevia rebaudiana in honor of Ovidio Rebaudy, a Paraguayan chemist who first extracted the sweet compounds in 1900. Rebaudy's crude extracts demonstrated that the sweetness was chemical, not psychological. The compounds could be isolated, concentrated, and applied to other foods. Commercial interest remained minimal for decades. Sugar was cheap and abundant. Transportation from remote Paraguayan highlands was expensive. The synthetic sweetener industry was developing saccharin and cyclamate. Stevia remained a botanical curiosity known mainly to scientists and the indigenous people who had always used it. Japan changed everything. In 1969, the Japanese government banned cyclamate due to cancer concerns discovered in laboratory studies. In 1977, they severely restricted saccharin for similar reasons after studies showed bladder tumors in rats. Japanese consumers demanded sweeteners. The food industry desperately needed alternatives. Government researchers began investigating natural options that synthetic chemistry had completely overlooked. A Japanese consortium, led by the Morita Kagaku Kogyo Company, began cultivating stevia in 1971. They established plantations in Paraguay and later in Japan, China, and Southeast Asia. They developed extraction processes to isolate stevioside with consistent purity and potency. They conducted extensive safety studies satisfying Japanese regulatory requirements. Dr. Masakazu Tanaka at the National Institute of Health Sciences in Tokyo led safety assessments throughout the 1970s and 80s. His research documented no adverse effects at consumption levels far exceeding any realistic dietary intake. His work established the foundation for Japanese approval that would eventually influence regulators worldwide. By 1988, stevia extracts captured 40% of Japan's commercial sweetener market. Major Japanese food companies, including Coca-Cola Japan, Kirin, and Suntory, incorporated stevia into beverages. Convenience stores sold stevia-sweetened products on every shelf. An entire nation had adopted the sweetener that America simultaneously banned. The Japanese experience proved commercial viability at massive scale. It proved safety through decades of mass consumption by millions of people. It proved that stevia could function in processed foods, beverages, tabletop sweeteners, and pharmaceutical applications. It proved everything the FDA claimed was unproven when they banned stevia in America 3 years later. There's a regulatory history in America that reveals exactly how corporate interests controlled food policy. The FDA approved aspartame in 1981 despite substantial controversy. Studies had shown neurological effects in laboratory animals. Scientists within the FDA had recommended against approval. The approval came after the Reagan administration appointed a new FDA commissioner who had previously worked as a defense contractor consultant. The FDA approved sucralose in 1998 after studies conducted entirely by its manufacturer, McNeil Nutritionals, a Johnson & Johnson subsidiary. Independent studies were not required. The company's own research satisfied regulatory requirements. The FDA approved acazolfame potassium in 1988 based primarily on studies conducted in the 1970s that critics argued were inadequate by modern standards. Against this backdrop of rapid synthetic sweetener approval, the FDA took a remarkably different approach to stevia. In 1991, the FDA issued an import alert classifying stevia as an unsafe food additive. The agency cited insufficient evidence of safety despite Japanese consumption data, showing no adverse effects across millions of users over 2 decades. The ban prohibited stevia in any food or beverage product. The American Herbal Products Association submitted a petition in 1994 requesting that stevia be recognized as generally recognized as safe, or GRAS. The FDA rejected the petition, demanding additional studies that would cost millions of dollars. Small herbal companies could not afford such studies. The rejection effectively maintained the ban. Senator John Kyle of Arizona introduced legislation in 1995 requiring the FDA to review its stevia position. The resulting compromise allowed stevia sales as a dietary supplement, but prohibited any marketing as a sweetener. Companies could sell stevia capsules but could not label them as sugar alternatives. The regulatory absurdity was complete. Meanwhile, Coca-Cola and Cargill were quietly developing their patented extraction process. They isolated rebaudioside A, the sweetest stevioglycoside with the cleanest taste profile. They filed patents protecting their methods. They branded the result as Truvia and submitted it for FDA approval in 2008. The FDA approved Truvia within months. The same agency that had demanded years of additional studies from small herbal companies approved a corporate petition almost immediately. The same compounds from the same plant became suddenly safe when a corporation controlled their extraction. There is a commercial strategy that explains why corporations preferred banning stevia to competing with it. The sugar industry generates approximately $100 billion in global annual revenue. American sugar producers alone generate over $10 billion annually, protected by government subsidies and import quotas that inflate domestic prices above world market levels. Sugar appears in 74% of packaged foods sold in American supermarkets. The industry employs hundreds of thousands of workers across farming, processing, and distribution. It wields enormous political influence through lobbying expenditures exceeding $10 million annually. Any threat to sugar consumption threatens an economic empire built over 2 centuries. Stevia threatens sugar more fundamentally than any artificial sweetener ever could. Synthetic sweeteners carry documented health concerns that limit consumer acceptance among health-conscious shoppers. Stevia is natural, harvested from a plant rather than synthesized in a factory. Synthetic sweeteners taste artificial to many consumers, with metallic or chemical aftertastes that compromise food quality. Stevia tastes closer to sugar with a clean sweetness profile that professional food developers prefer. Synthetic sweeteners are industrial products requiring chemical facilities and complex supply chains. Stevia grows in gardens, potentially allowing consumers to bypass commercial sweetener sales entirely. The sugar industry could not allow a natural, zero-calorie, better-tasting, home-growable alternative to reach American consumers. They used regulatory capture to prevent it. Documents obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests show sugar industry communications with FDA officials during the 1990s. The Sugar Association funded studies questioning stevia safety. They submitted citizen petitions requesting stricter stevia regulation. They coordinated messaging emphasizing the unknown risks of stevia consumption. The artificial sweetener industry had parallel interests. NutraSweet, the aspartame manufacturer, dominated the diet sweetener market through the 1980s and 90s. Their patents generated billions in licensing revenue. A natural alternative that consumers might prefer threatened their business model entirely. When patents on aspartame began expiring in the early 2000s, the calculation changed. Companies could no longer profit from blocking stevia. They could only profit from controlling it. Coca-Cola's partnership with Cargill created exactly that control. Their patented extraction process gave them competitive advantage, even as whole leaf stevia remained marginalized. Their corporate resources enabled FDA approval that small companies could never afford. Their market power ensured distribution that competitors could not match. The 17-year ban was not scientific. It was commercial. Stevia threatened profits. Once corporations captured stevia profits for themselves, the ban evaporated. There's growing information for anyone wanting to cultivate stevia at home and bypass corporate control entirely. Stevia grows as a perennial in USDA hardiness zones 9 through 11, roughly the Gulf Coast states and Southern California. In colder zones, it grows as an annual or can be overwintered indoors. The plant reaches 18 to 24 inches in height and spreads about 12 inches wide. Starting from seed is possible but challenging. Stevia seeds have notoriously low germination rates, often below 15%. Commercial growers typically propagate from cuttings, which root easily in moist soil or water. Nurseries and online suppliers sell starter plants that establish faster than seeds. Stevia prefers full sun, but tolerates partial shade. It requires consistent moisture, but not waterlogged soil. Well-drained garden soil amended with compost provides ideal growing conditions. Container cultivation works well for those with limited space or colder climates requiring winter protection. Harvest leaves throughout the growing season by pinching stems just above leaf nodes. This encourages bushy growth and continuous production. The sweetest leaves develop just before flowering, typically in late summer. When flower buds appear, harvest the entire plant for maximum sweetness concentration. Fresh leaves can be used immediately in tea or crushed into foods. For storage, dry leaves in a dehydrator or in a warm, dark location with good airflow. Dried leaves retain sweetness for years when stored in airtight containers away from light. Creating liquid extract requires steeping dried leaves in food-grade alcohol or vegetable glycerin for 24 to 48 hours. Strain the liquid and reduce over low heat to concentrate sweetness. Homemade extract lacks the standardization of commercial products, but costs virtually nothing after initial plant investment. One mature stevia plant produces enough leaves to replace several pounds of sugar throughout a growing season. 10 plants could supply a family's sweetening needs entirely. The economics favor home cultivation dramatically compared to purchasing processed stevia products. There's a future where stevia either democratizes sweetness or remains captured by corporate interests protecting market control. The plant itself cannot be patented. Stevia rebaudiana is a species that evolved naturally in the highlands of Paraguay and belongs to no corporation anywhere on Earth. Anyone can legally grow it. Anyone can harvest leaves from their own plants. Anyone can create extracts using basic kitchen equipment and simple techniques that require no specialized knowledge. The extraction processes can be patented. The specific proprietary methods Coca-Cola and Cargill use to isolate rebaudioside A are protected intellectual property until their patents expire. Companies using those exact methods must license the technology or develop alternative extraction approaches. But the fundamental chemistry cannot be owned. The regulatory framework currently favors corporate extracts over whole leaf stevia. FDA approval specifically covers rebaudiana and similar highly purified extracts. Whole leaf stevia and crude extracts remain in regulatory limbo, permitted as dietary supplements but still not officially approved as food additives or sweeteners for labeling purposes. Consumer awareness increasingly threatens corporate control. Every home gardener who grows stevia bypasses the entire commercial sweetener industry completely. Every home cook who uses fresh leaves instead of purchasing processed packets refuses participation in the system that banned this plant for 17 years while protecting inferior alternatives. The diabetes epidemic demands alternatives to sugar immediately. Over 34 million Americans currently have diabetes, according to CDC statistics. Over 88 million American adults have prediabetes, placing them at high risk for developing full diabetes within years. Sugar consumption directly contributes to both conditions by spiking blood glucose and overwhelming insulin response. A zero-calorie natural sweetener that does not affect blood glucose could reduce disease burden dramatically if widely adopted and if barriers to adoption were removed. The obesity crisis requires meaningful calorie reduction. Added sugars contribute approximately 300 calories daily to the average American diet, according to USDA dietary surveys. These are empty calories providing sweetness without nutrition. Replacing those 300 calories with stevia eliminates them entirely without sacrificing the sweet taste that consumers demand. The plant is ready. It grows easily in most climates. It requires minimal care beyond basic watering. It produces abundantly throughout the growing season. It has been proven safe through 1,500 years of continuous indigenous use and 50 years of Japanese commercial consumption involving hundreds of millions of people. One single leaf, 300 times sweeter than sugar. 0 calories, 0 metabolic impact. 1,500 years of documented safe human use. Hidden for 17 long years so corporations could develop profitable patents. Approved within mere months once those patents existed. Marketed at premium prices for proprietary extraction that kitchen equipment can replicate. The file is completely open. What people do with this information determines whether sweetness remains corporate property or returns to gardens where it belongs. Subscribe now and hit the bell to see what other natural solutions were hidden so corporations could profit from controlling what nature provides free.